There is now a new way to enter the Dark Aether, use your items, and still keep your tombstone. Now stick around to the end of this video because there are some pros and cons to using this method that I will want you to be aware of. So let's start with the initial setting up of your tombstone. If you already have a tombstone set, you can skip ahead to entering the Dark Aether that is chaptered here in this video. If it's your first time setting up your tombstone, you want to bring in the items you want to duplicate to set in your tombstone, as you can see on my screen. But I highly recommend you bring in at least a Tombstone Soto perk and a Scorcher. If you plan on entering the Dark Aether, I recommend an additional Wonder Weapon, but I will talk more on this later as to why. When you are in game, you will need to buy the Tombstone perk to use, or you can find it in game. We don't want to use the one that we brought in because we will need that for later. So once you buy Tombstone, you can now make your way to the Bad Signal portal and activate the portal. Once you activate the portal, you want to immediately jump in the water to start drowning your character. Now this is very important. You need to wait until your character's oxygen level bar is in the red before you open your map and vote yes to enter the portal. The reason for this is timing. You need to make sure your character is eliminated and the elimination screen pops up first before the portal animation happens. Now from here, console players, you will close out of your game when the portal animation begins. PC players, you will close your game out as soon as the portal animation ends. When you open your game back up, in your gear tab, you should have all the items you brought in, and to know you truly set your tombstone, your tacticals and field upgrade should be blank. You can now unequip to stash your items with the exception of the Tombstone perk and the Scorcher. We want to keep those for the next game we jump into. Now we have our tombstone set and we are going to enter the Dark Aether. For those of you that skipped ahead to this chapter, hello again. A few tips here. I highly recommend bringing in a Scorcher and another Wonder Weapon for the Dark Aether. And for all of you, you will need a sigil or a Elder Sigil as well. Now that we are in game, we want to go ahead and first use the tombstone that we brought in with us and also our Scorcher that we also brought in as well. This just allows us to go straight to our tombstone to stow our items quicker. Now, after you crumble your tombstone, you can now make your way to the main Dark Aether Rift portal. Using either sigil that you brought in with you, you can now activate that portal, jump in the water, and just like before, wait until your character's oxygen level is in the red before voting yes to enter the Dark Aether. Now, instead of closing out your game, we want the game to complete the animation and load us into the Dark Aether. Now that we are in the Dark Aether, our tombstone is set, and you will be able to tell, since if you brought a weapon in, you no longer will have any weapons in your hands. You won't have any perks or tacticals. This is why I do highly suggest bringing in or having in your tombstone 2 Wonder Weapons. So when you use your Wonder Weapons, you're going to notice that both will be stripped of its rarity, allowing us to use not only a legendary ether tool or any tool that you brought in, as well as your pap crystals. Now notice I still have my Tombstone Soda Can perk, and it's very important that you do not use this item when you are in the Dark Aether. The main reason for this is you don't want to lose your tombstone or mess up the tombstone that we already set from eliminating ourselves and entering the portal. But every other item that you brought in is absolutely okay to use. So once you have navigated the Dark Aether or completed what you have wanted to do in the Dark Aether in terms of missions or contracts, you can now leave through the portal rift and exit normally and still maintain your tombstone. The only items that should remain are the items that you did not use when in the Dark Aether. Now, in the next game that we enter, our tombstone will still be at the cemetery. However, you will need to bring in another sigil if you do plan on entering the Dark Aether again. So one thing you can do is you can bring in a sigil and interchange between the Bad Signal exfil in order to duplicate more sigils. And then you can use those duplicated sigils to enter the Dark Aether and bring in more whenever you want to duplicate them. So what are the pros and the cons of using this method? The pros still being you can enter the Dark Aether and try and complete some contracts for high value loot and schematics while being able to maintain your tombstone and be able to use the items you have in your rucksack after you enter the Dark Aether. However, the cons, if you bring in one of your insured weapons, you will lose that weapon to cooldowns and you will not have it when entering the Dark Aether. You also will have no tacticals or perks, and if you don't have any wonder weapon cases that you are bringing into the Dark Aether, you essentially are stuck navigating the Dark Aether to the exfil portal with no firepower at all. So lastly, yes, you have wonder weapons, which I am using the VR11, which is super OP, but wonder weapons in some cases are not the best in certain scenarios, and I find it a bit harder to complete any contracts in the Dark Aether, at least solo, with this method. So my recommendation here is if you absolutely want to go into the Dark Aether and use any of those wonder weapons and go in with friends to try and farm any schematics with a squad, absolutely do that. However, what I highly recommend is just using the Tombstone method as is to duplicate your items. And once you have a large stash of duplicated items, you can just go into the game normally, enter into the Dark Aether with an actual weapon. And that way it's so much easier to navigate and complete the Dark Aether, whether it's through the Sigil or Elder Sigil side. And that way you can farm more higher tier items as well. And then when you need more high tier loot, you can go ahead and use that duplication method again in order to dupe more items as well. And if you made it this far and found this helpful, do me a huge favor and like the video. And if you are new, unlock the Mayhem by subscribing to the channel so you can unlock more video content just like this, as well as weapon guides, challenge unlocks, and strategies. Until next time, peace.